Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar on replacing InfoPath Forms with NITRO Studio. We have a lot of material to cover and hopefully some interesting information and useful information for everyone. My name is Scott Restivo. I'm with Crow Canyon Software. We have been, let me get over to the next slide here. Yeah, presented by me, Scott Restivo, President and CEO of Crow Canyon Software. Crow Canyon Software has been in business for 20 years now, and we've been doing quite a few things in the Microsoft Office and SharePoint space for those years. We've been working in SharePoint for the last 12 years, and we have a set of business applications that run in SharePoint on premises or in Office 365. We also have developed the NITRO Studio no-code application creation platform. We'll be talking about that quite a bit today as a replacement for InfoPath, but it also can serve as just a pure straight up forms creation, workflow creation tool inside of SharePoint, whether it's on premises or Office 365, as well as replace other legacy systems besides InfoPath. Some people are using Access Forms and other such tools, and they want to move to a more modern interfaces and more complete workflow scenarios. And that's what we do with the NITRO Studio. You can build custom applications and convert paper or email processes, InfoPath processes to a SharePoint Office 365 based solution. And we also build custom solutions when people come to us with a particular set of needs. So we have these three things going on: the business applications that are out of the box, ready to go. We have the NITRO Studio, which powers up our business applications, but also can be used by itself to build your own. And we do the custom solutions. So let me go back one slide and talk a little bit about the webinar here. We have some data sheets you can download. It's part of the webinar screen. You should see a download area, a handouts area. That's one thing. We also have a questions box there, and I encourage you during this webinar to put in any questions you want. We'll try and get to them during the webinar, but if not, we'll get to them after and engage in a conversation and dialogue about InfoPath replacement and NITRO Studio. It's a really lively subject. It's a hot subject. Many people are talking about it and seeing what kind of solutions you can come up with, and we're right thick in the midst of it. We have a large number of resources. We have the NITRO Studio. We have experience doing this. So the point is, we'll go through all that in this webinar, but use our resources, stay in touch, ask questions, and we'll help you out, and we'll do this journey together, moving off InfoPath Forms or whatever other legacy solutions to a modern SharePoint and Office 365 based solutions. We have vast experience in it from doing it for the last, well, SharePoint for the last 12 years, but applications for the last 20 or more years. So we can certainly be a useful resource for you. The first thing I'd like to do in order to get a sense in this webinar is put up a poll that asks where you're at in your InfoPath replacement strategy or project. So I'll put that up right now and hopefully get some answers on it, and I appreciate your taking the time to do that. And we'll get a sense of where people are at in the InfoPath replacement. And it'll be interesting to compare it historically to when we've done webinars previously and what results we got at that time versus results we get now. So let's see. I'll give it a few more seconds here to load up there. Most people have voted already. Okay, so rather than prolong it, it's been about a minute, so I'll just go close the poll and share the results for a second here, and then we can talk about that for a moment. I don't actually see the poll results, do I? Anyway, what they are, poll results. Ryan, you got the poll results there?
Yeah, it'll be under polls in the GoToWebinar option. Right now, we're seeing 64% for a very preliminary information gathering stage, 5% doing research, 9% started, 5% well along in the process, and just about 20% looking to gather some more info on NITRO Studio.
So, oh, great. And that's an interesting results, because in previous times, say 6 months ago, the numbers were actually a bit higher, even though 64% of very preliminary is sort of high, it's over the majority, but we were seeing in the 70s and 80%. So it seems like some people are starting to move towards finding solutions for for InfoPath replacement and making some progress, doing some research, or have started converting. And the 5% well along is a good indicator of that very few people have gotten to that point where they really have gotten InfoPath replaced or well along to the goal of replacing InfoPath. So it's very much what I kind of expected, but I'm glad to see that there is more movement along towards the besides just doing preliminary, we're starting to do actually make some progress towards movement replacing the InfoPath forms. So all right, so and then some people are just interested in NITRO Studio, and we'll cover some of that here today. As part of InfoPath replacement, you'll see that there's NITRO Studio's capabilities, and we also will do other webinars. There's one tomorrow, and we have regular ones every month on NITRO Studio. So we'll talk to you directly about NITRO Studio, and also about I was going to encourage people to do one-on-one demos with us too. That's a very important way to talk and have interaction. Like the webinar, one thing I always find about these webinars is I'm talking and most people are listening, asking questions just by text. And it's much better, when you get really more into it, to have a serious conversation back and forth, interactive, and express what you're looking for and what you're doing. All right. So with that encouragement to do a demo, sign up for a demo or a trial with us, then I'll move into what I'm talking about here. So Crow Canyon has a number of business applications out of the box. We have a help desk, an asset management, a customer support, a facilities or work orders management tool. We have equipment tracking, we have contract management, we have purchasing, we have onboarding and other HR functions. These are basically core business applications that we put together for our customers over the years, and it's in use in organizations around the world. If somebody wants a help desk, or somebody wants help desk plus asset management, or they want a work order system or purchasing system in SharePoint or Office 365, we're providing those right now to them. All of these are built on our NITRO Studio as the underlying layer. So we also have other type of business applications like access requests, HR requests. We do a lot of compliance and regulatory workflows. As you can imagine, that's important inside of the SharePoint and Office 365 world, with document management and legal requests and membership services. So it's a range of out-of-the-box solutions. And as I get further into the InfoPath replacement, one of the suggestions, one of the possibilities, let's say, is that you can replace an InfoPath form without having to greenfield and start all over from scratch with just hopping on board with one of our out-of-the-box applications, and that saves the whole trouble of developing it from scratch. The InfoPath replacement. But we do have this NITRO Studio also. NITRO Studio is our powerful layer of application creation platform with forms, workflows. There's so many abilities in there, and we'll show you the wide range of possibilities we have in there. We have power up your SharePoint Office 365. That means on premises, SharePoint 2013, 2016, 2019, and SharePoint Online and Office 365. We're also doing things with bots and team bots and everything else, but that's focused on SharePoint Office 365. You can create flexible, easily deployed applications with NITRO Studio that suit your particular business needs. We can replace InfoPath and other legacy solutions with the NITRO Studio in there as a form and workflow tool. So why did we come up with it? How did we come up with it? Well, we looked at SharePoint when we first started building applications in SharePoint, and we found that it had quite a number of good capabilities. There's sites, there's kind of a structure to it, a database structure. There's sites, site collections, lists, there's columns, permission. There's authentication, integration with Active Directory, views and filters. There's a number of capabilities in SharePoint. It's not a bad platform as it is out of the box, yet it is missing a number of things. And what about forms and portals and workflows and custom columns and email sync and reporting and database integration? See, we've been doing application development many years. And when you run into things that are really necessary in an application and you don't find it in the platform you're working on, well, what we did is we went ahead and built it. We built it with apps and web parts on the on-premises, and then apps in the app model, and now SPFX and whatever, technicalities of it. But the point is that we're building a platform that powers up the SharePoint and Office 365. And here's a graphical representation of it. There's SharePoint, Office 365. Those are the symbols for it down here. We have our NITRO Studio layer. And then out of that comes business applications or custom development out of that. So we offer basically three things here. The NITRO Studio oven by itself for you to build your applications that fit your particular needs. business applications that cover a core set of business processes and pretty standard across the board, like a help desk or work order system or purchasing. And we also do custom development on it. There's incredible numbers of things you can do with SharePoint and Office 365 once you have the power, the platform and the power to do it. And that's what our NITRO Studio does. And you can see that we focus on this in 3 areas with the NITRO Studio. There's what we call the 3 pillars, the 3 areas of application design and development. And we developed this model over the years. And what it is there's the UI UX, the user's engagement and empowering. There's the workflow and business process, the streamlining and automation of the processes, and there's a reporting and which drives a continuous cycle of improvement. And our tools in NITRO Studio address those 3 areas. There are our forms with dynamic forms, responsive forms, mobile-friendly forms. There's our portals, our branding, our AI with chatbots that address the engaging, empowering of users in NITRO Studio in the SharePoint Office 365 environment. So your applications, whether it's our out-of-the-box applications or ones you build yourself out of NITRO Studio, have these components in it. You're building on a base of Crow Candid's expertise in building applications for so many years, and that we built natively into the NITRO Studio, that you can take advantage of it by having the forms, portals, AI, mobile-friendly, responsive, et cetera, et cetera. That's in UI UX. You're in the workflows and business process world. We've had workflows and custom actions, approvals, alerts, automatic routing, database integration, email synchronization, and much more that can be done to automate the process and streamline it. And then in the reporting, and this is an area that is maybe not given as much attention as it should in many cases, but for us, we have found it very valuable to have a reporting with dashboards and tiles and dials and trend analysis and charts that drive a continuous cycle of improvement, so that in your application, you're just not going through the motions of fulfilling requests. You're also iteratively improving the process as you get the stats back and you do trend analysis. How many this kind of problem? Which user group has the most issues, or why is there so many questions here? And you start to build tools that can decrease the load on your support staff or your request management staff by maybe building up a robust set of FAQs or knowledge base, and or informing the chatbot if you're using a chatbot with more informative data for it to chew on, you could say, in a way. So it isn't just doing the mechanics of request management, it's also the idea of iteratively, continuously improving it, so that you're giving your users a better experience and you're reducing the workload on your staff. So what I'll do here is jump off of the NITRO Studio train a little bit. I'll go into it more later, and I want to talk specifically about replacing InfoPath and the considerations and dynamics and issues and problems, and along with that, it's a complex field, replacing InfoPath Forms. There's a lot of complexities to it, a lot of considerations, and we've been working on it quite a bit. And like I said, getting the resources together to make that happen, make people aware of what's necessary and how we can help along with that journey. So the first thing about replacing InfoPath Forms is that the time is now to get off. I mean, really, people are waiting, and they're thinking there's going to be some magic bullet, magic solution. I mean, Microsoft's going to sweep in with something that's going to automatically convert your InfoPath Forms to some new tool, Power Apps or something. It's just not going to happen. We've done webinars on this with MVPs and other people. We've done a lot of research on it, and we've talked with Microsoft, and basically it's you have to find your own basic InfoPath Forms replacement methodology and solution there. So basically they're saying, this was a year and a half ago, they're saying, now is the time to start thinking about migrating your forms. And I would even add more emphasis that now is the time not just start thinking about it, but actually start taking steps in that direction. And it's good to see from our poll that some of you are already doing that and have become ahead of the game here, because you don't want to wait to the last minute. Here, support for InfoPath will go out. Let's assume you're on InfoPath 2013. Well, mainstream support is July 2021 ends. Mainstream support ends July 2021. That's not that far off if you have a large number of forms to convert. The forms don't convert in one day. It takes time to consider the business process and analyze it and come up with a new form and do user acceptance testing, et cetera, et cetera. I'll talk a little bit that more later, but it isn't like an instantaneous switch from InfoPath to the new solution. So July 2020, it gives you a year and a half, roughly, maybe a little more, but that's definitely time to get going on it. But it's more than that. It's not just the support's ending. InfoPath by itself is holding you back. What we mean by that is that even if InfoPath was not being deprecated, it was not being phased out, you'd want to move off it anyway, because you're missing a lot of new technologies that are available now that weren't available when InfoPath was created. InfoPath was created around the mid 2000s, 2005, and it was developed until 2013 based on the XML, XSN type technology, and it just doesn't fit the modern times, the cloud mobile world. This was before Microsoft made the big push for mobile and cloud, and mobile smartphones became really, really predominant in so many ways. After Microsoft could just decided not to retrofit InfoPath. It just decided not to. And in 2013, that's what, 6 years ago, they stopped development. And 6 years in technology, that's like ancient. We're talking about ancient history. It's probably a bit of an exaggeration. I'm sure some of you use and happily use an InfoPath Forms right now, and they work. But you also think about what you're missing by not moving ahead with what is in the new technologies. And we're talking here about mobile friendly being the predominant one. Cloud, mobile friendly type interfaces, responsive design. We're talking about not supporting modern browsers like Edge and Chrome. It's a clunky technology. It's no longer being developed by Microsoft. That's quite important. And there's some issues with connecting to data sources because, the data sources have moved on, but InfoPath hasn't. So, yeah, I don't know if you have to make this case to your bosses or your managers or things, but there's real reasons to move off of InfoPath other than the fact that it's being deprecated and no longer being supported. So number one rule here, and this goes on and on, is stop creating InfoPath forms. This has been, I will send you a link to a blog by one of the MVPs, and they have this funny video where everybody comes up and they say, no, don't do it. Stop right now. No longer do it. It's kind of, we'll send you the link after the webinar. And it's kind of a funny thing, but if you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. Classic advice there. But the thing is, if you're going to create more InfoPath forms, you're going to create what's called a technical debt, which has to be repaid once the support ends or once it moved off. I mean, it's inevitable. You're going to have to move off InfoPath because it's not only old technology, it's also no longer being supported, and 5 years down the road, it's going to be just way out of it's it's no point. You're going to have to replace those forms, is what I'm trying to say. So first one, stop creating them and use a different solution. Hey, go to our NITRO Studio and start creating forms out of that. Why not? Why create InfoPath forms? Make the move now to it and get used to it, and then start. You can make the new forms in our NITRO Studio and then convert the other ones later. But number one rule there. So another aspect of the InfoPath replacement that I want to cover here, and this is sort of on a more of a higher, maybe thought level here, not the mechanics of moving InfoPath over, but more like a place where you want to step back and say, let's think about this a moment. We have this InfoPath form, this process, this business process we put together. What can we do different? I mean, do we have to just replicate it blindly? Just repeat the same form over there? It was built on technology from at least 6, if not more years ago. Maybe there's different things. Circumstances have changed, let's look at what we're really trying to solve here is the problem. What's the business purpose? Are there new ways of solving the same problem can be done with the new technology now available, such as mobile devices or different ways? And also it could be things like the internal processes in your company have changed a bit, but the form being kind of stuck in a certain status has not changed. So this is a real time to reconsider and optimize your processes, not just think of blindly replicating the forms. I think that's an important point. Well, but there are some cases where, where is it? I put it here. No, all right, well, anyway, I'll say it then verbally. There are some cases where you absolutely have to replicate the form exactly. And what that means is that because of some regulatory or compliance reason or some issue with the bureaucracy or issue with how the form was developed through a long committee process, you don't want to go through that again, or there could be user training issues, you may have to replicate the form exactly, pixel by pixel almost to do that. In that case, there's only so much flexibility you have to incorporate new technologies into it. But still, it's important to think in terms of solutions. And if you can move it towards a more efficient, more productive, utilizing the latest technologies, you certainly want to do that. So how do you move off InfoPath? What are some of the things that can be done to, now more on a technical or mechanical level, how do you move off InfoPath? How do you actually do it? Well, you can catalog the forms. This is what I call catalog or inventory of the forms. This is the idea of knowing what you have in place, what is there, the scope of your project. Now, as I went through this and talked to this over the last 6 months with numerous people, there's kind of like two approaches that people take. One is the incremental approach, meaning, well, I just want to move this one form. I'm in this one department. We have this one InfoPath or two InfoPath forms. I don't care what, it's not that I don't care, but I'm not concerned with what the other InfoPath forms, whatever number there are in the organization. I just have to deal with this one or two in my department. Well, in that case, you might just not need really to build a whole catalog of everything in the company. But if you're doing the full replacement approach, which is opposed to the incremental approach, then you do have to have some good idea of you have to have an exact idea of what's there in your environment, and what it's going to take to get from point A to point B, and what forms to do first, and how to manage the whole thing. So it really depends on the scope of your project and your responsibility for replacing the InfoPath forms. And that's a conversation we can have directly with you. And in a webinar like this, it's, I'm talking to a wide range of people in a wide range of circumstances. But these are the conversations we love to have with our potential customers and say, how can we help you in your specific situation? What's the best advice in that point? What's the best way forward? I can talk in general terms in this webinar in the sense that there's an incremental approach, a full replacement approach. You want to catalog it. But in any case, you do want to know what you have there, whether it's the one form or the multiple forms. So if it's the one form, you probably can just write it up on a spreadsheet or something and just say like, okay, here's the form, here's what it does, here's the people who are involved. But there are a number of automated tools that will go in and query your SharePoint server, whether it's farm or tenancy, and pull back all the information about InfoPath forms there. Metalogic, which was bought by Quest, has something called Metalogic Expert, which is free. Rencor is, we've had a lot of conversations with Rencor. They have this SP Transformator. We're buddies with them. We see them at the shows and we talk to their technical people. So, there's stuff we can do with Rencor, with the SP Transformator. We're also developing a tool that specifically queries just for the InfoPath forms. The SP Transformator does the whole query of a large set of data in the SharePoint farm. We're working on one that just pulls out InfoPath forms information, and then from that we'll have a tool that will put that into one of our NITRO applications, so that there's an InfoPath replacement inventory application that we build using all our NITRO workflows and forms, and you can manage your whole project using our InfoPath replacement inventory tool that should be out in it by the end of the year, if not sooner. That will have that available, so that you could use one of, made sense for us that, hey, we have NITRO Studio and it has all the forms and workflows. Let's just organize the InfoPath replacement project using one of our own tools, So anyway, so once you have the catalog in place, whether it's in a spreadsheet or in the tool that we're going to have by the end of the year, I say, right, or whatever, then you want to refine the catalog. And what you want to do with refining it is say, the fewer forms I have, the less work of conversion, obviously, right? So you might have 300 forms, but maybe only 100 of them are actual use right now. The others were created and abandoned, or they had a purpose and they got superseded by something else. So that's very important if you're looking at a full replacement project, to really reduce the load that you have in there. And maybe the InfoPath form data could be archived. Should it be updated or rebuilt, or should it simply be left behind? You can look at usage statistics and whatever information you can gather, whether from it's a sort of colloquial, anecdotal from talking to people, or whether it's from actual data that's in your system. Find out if that form is of any value, and is it worth converting over, or is it worth abandoning it? And one other thing about this, that see if it's the outdated and really used forms that need to be replicated. Of course not. So let me go back here and talk a little more about refining the catalog, because this is an important part. You may find that as you go through it, that there is a, thinking in terms of solutions, not forms now, that Crow Canyon or some other third-party vendor, but I'm from Crow Canyon, so I'm talking about that, has a business application that will fit the exact need that you have for the InfoPath form. So then again, like I was saying earlier, there's no need to rebuild it. You just say, well, that's what we did in InfoPath. Here's what we're doing now in Office 365. It's a suggestion. We can talk about that. Okay, let's look at Rencor's tool for SB Transformator. See, you got all this information. That's a huge amount of information, and maybe more than you need. But InfoPath Forms specifically, it's talking about what you have here on the InfoPath Forms, and it helps you build the catalog, is what I'm referring to there. Okay, and also another tool that we know, our buddies up there in Denmark, Fusion No Code Solution. And they have a tool that can extract InfoPath data. Now, I'm not talking about forms and workflows. I'm talking about data, like people filled out the forms over the years, a whole bunch of data sitting there. Maybe there's 1,000 entries for the request that whatever the InfoPath fulfilled. And now it's sitting there as data. And this tool, Fusion No Code Solution, can move it can extract it in a sense from the InfoPath and put it into a SharePoint list. Well, actually, you could put it into a database or anywhere. It's taking the data out and being able to push it into some other source. And if you put it in a SharePoint list, well, lo and behold, you have a list that has all the fields and columns and everything else, and the data in there that was filled in. So you have maybe 500 forms filled in. Now you have 500 line items inside of a SharePoint list with the data and the columns. However, I mean, that's great. It's great for archiving. However, you don't have the forms, you don't have the workflows. Also, there's interaction between different elements like associated and linked items that's not necessarily carried over as accurately or tied together as much as it should. So, it's not perfect, but it does give you a way to archive InfoPath data to some degree. And when we're talking about moving forms and workflows, there's an important point to make here, which is that the forms are in InfoPath are an old technology that some other organizations we looked at have tried to take this automated tool that will take the forms and then create it in some other solution, usually their own solution. In other words, they want to have some process of reading the structure of the InfoPath form and then have it automatically go into the new solution that they have in the same layout that the form was in InfoPath. And as I went through that, I realized it's a bit of a chimera. A chimera is something that you wish for, but never quite possible. In other words, it's a very much the hope for solution that's just not there. It's just not going to happen. It's kind of a mirage. When these people have used these tools, they found that the form came out all kind of sort of messed up, and it was actually more work to revise the form than recreate it from scratch. So, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the forms and workflows being converted automatically from InfoPath to some other solution is just not there. Just not gonna happen, because it's just and I went into with talking to dev teams and everything. The point is that it's just such an old technology that it doesn't translate to the new one at all. It was done in previous style of technology. Same with the workflow, and there's no easy way to convert it over. No way really, in any good way to convert it over without more work than creating a new one from scratch. So, but archiving the data is certainly possible, because data is data. Data is just data. So that's easy enough to move over. Forms, workflows, much more complex and not possible to move over. Anyone has any comment on that and wants to talk more about it, we can go into that, because there is that kind of like wishful, this kind of idea of the wouldn't it be nice, wouldn't it be so much easier if that was in place? Yes, it would, but it isn't. So what are you gonna do, right? Okay, so we're reviewing the catalog to determine scope of work. How closely do the forms need to be replicated? I talked about sometimes there's no flexibility due to regulatory and compliance concerns or bureaucracy, or designed by committee, and it's too much effort to change the design because you have to go through a whole laborious process of talking out, redesigning the form. And also user training is a big one, because actually we had one company had 1,000 users using this one form, and everything on the form had to be exactly the same, because otherwise they have to retrain the users and rewrite the documentation. This was even down to small petty stuff like, whether it said 0.00 in the dollar or whether it said 0 in the dollar box. And I mean, all kinds of like picayune stuff that surprised me, frankly, that it was that much of a concern. But it was. And then the customer explained that it's 1,000 people and the managers just do not want to retrain 1,000 people on how to use the new form. So you may run into those concerns. Okay. But if you don't, if you have flexibility, then you can look at the new features: mobile, cloud, database connectivity. We go into that more. Also, you can address changing needs of the organization, the department, and end users. Does the form still meet their needs? There are other ways that you can be done. Would a portal be more sufficient? Would it be more efficient? Would a chatbot is something you can bring in? What about a knowledge base and FAQs? I mean, all kinds of tricks of the trade that we're very familiar with that can be brought into the form, the process, the solution that you're trying to replicate on the new environment. Mark Anderson, MVP, was talking one time about cultural and user adoption as being some of the barriers too. So you do have to address not just the technology, but also the concerns of the users, engage them in the process of revising the form and keep them alerted that things are changing. That's more of a social kind of consideration, but I wanted to throw it in there so that we know it's not just here's your new form, good luck. That the users do have to be engaged in the management, obviously management, but I mean end users especially, to be engaged in the change that's going on there. Okay, so moving off InfoPath, by now hopefully you are aware of rule number 1, which is stop creating InfoPath forms. And through the cataloging and analysis of your situation, you have a good sense of what needs to be replicated, what can be changed, what can be modified, what new technologies can be added in, and how much work is involved. And I'm simplifying, believe me, I'm simplifying this quite a bit. This analysis of the process could take quite some time to find out what each part of the InfoPath form does and how it can be replicated in a new solution. So that's, it's work. That's the work, right? That's the work of moving. And right in there with you. We'll help you with it. If we'll show you how to use NITRO Studio to accomplish the goals, et cetera, et cetera. We have a slew of resources available, as well as our own expertise. So next step is how to make the move once you get to the point where you're ready. And we basically could see 3 approaches from our experience. And we came up with these 3 images. One is toe in the water idea, like, well, let's experiment with NITRO forms. It's a good, if you're in that place of just exploring, like the 64% of that poll we had earlier, this is the place where you want to be. Experiment with the forms, do a download of it, see what it can do, talk to us, show us your InfoPath forms that you have in place right now. Give it to us to send it to us to take a look at and say, can it do this? Can it do that? How much work is this? Have that conversation. Let's start the discussion of the toe in the water. You get a good sense of what can and cannot be done before making any production changes, as well as what kind of changes and modifications would be beneficial to the solution you're trying to replace there. And then once you move in that, or you could just go right to step 2 and right to step 3 for that matter. But this is just a framework, you could say. So another is to wait in slowly. Let's take one form. Let's take an InfoPath form and replace it. Put it in production. See what it takes. This is the they call it identifying the migration candidate. You want to look at the certain forms you have and say, well, this looks like a good one. It's kind of lightly used, but it's still kind of important. And we'll get a real sense from this what it's going to take to do an InfoPath replacement of the larger set of the InfoPath forms in your catalog. And then you could really adjust your process and see what's needed going forward and get that good user feedback on how to proceed. The third approach is to dive right in. And that means, usually you do that after you do 1 and 2, you got some experimentation going, you've waded in, now you feel real confident that you can move ahead with a full-scale replacement. So you're going to go ahead and do that. The other place where number 3, the dive right in, comes into play is when you only have a few forms and maybe you don't want to go through the whole you definitely have to try out NITRO, but it's no necessary to create a big elaborate project with we're only placing 1 or 2 forms, right? So that's what I'm trying to say there, is that work closely with Crow Canyon for the migration. So that's how we're looking at moving off InfoPath at the current status. And there's a lot of considerations here. It's a complex thing, and and having the conversation one-on-one to understand your situation it will be very, very useful, because we find people with 1 or 2 or maybe a dozen forms, and we find people with hundreds, even thousands of forms. We have people who want to move right away and people don't. We have corporate cultures that are very amenable to change and ones that aren't. We have ones that are very restricted by bureaucratic and regulatory situations, and others that are more free form, like startup, kind of like, let's go fast and move fast on everything. And others are very slow because they have to go through certain decision-making processes. So it's a really wide range of possibilities there. And really important to have the conversation and find out which is the best way going forward. And we're developing hand in hand with our customers who are going through this, the materials and resources and processes for doing this. And I'm going to go into the NITRO Studio and show you some of that pretty soon, right away. But I want to show you a couple other things first. Let me get this up here. Okay, our Crow Canyon site. I'll move over our Crow Canyon site here. We have, of course, applications, our NITRO Studio, and all the information there. InfoPath replacement. We're coming out with a new ebook on the guide to moving off. We're coming up with that new application I was talking about. So there's a lot of material coming out. It's a very, very vibrant, alive field of this. We have lots of resources available on InfoPath replacement, and we bring it down the bottom. We have a number of data sheets and webinars we've done. Like this one will be recorded and available on the web. We work with MVPs like Joel Olson. We have infographics. We have a number of blogs, some case studies. So a large set of information that's growing on what's possible. How to facilitate and participate with you in this InfoPath replacement journey there. So that's a lot about the InfoPath replacement. But now I want to show you some other things, such as the forms. Let's go into NITRO Studio a little bit. Take a moment there. And what's the next slide? Let me see. Oh yeah, so we're going to go into NITRO Studio a bit more now. And what I was talking about earlier, it's a repeat of the same slide. So now let me move over to the NITRO Studio and show you what the forms can do. First, I'll show you a forms showcase, some of the forms we have in place. And you can see a number of forms. They're probably tiny, tiny on yours. Let me go show you more a real live one. Like here's a form. Here's a form we did in NITRO Studio. And this is made up Yukon Yak Market. I had to change the name of the company, but this is access to information request. And you can see like all kinds of different ways to line it up with different fields in it and different information. And it's not showing here because it's not, I can show you if we ran the form, but basically it can pull information in, automatically fills. It can, if you click something, something else will, a dynamic form will show up. It fits on a mobile device. There's signature pads. This is one example of one of the types of forms we can create. Plus we can put these like nice logos and stuff up there. We can have forms like this, and we have such a variety of forms. This is one of the forms we can have, whatever form works in your environment, whatever form you need to replicate. And if you put information on it or institution only, we can make these read only for the end users and only available to certain other users. We have signature pads. If somebody clicks something, it can open up another area, dynamic forms. And these should work on the mobile device. Let's see if this is a mobile friendly one. I don't know. Well, the ones are mobile friendly. We have mobile friendly forms. We have modern UI, classic UI. It's all different ways you can arrange the form according to what you need on your form. I'm just showing a sample of what's possible here. Here's another one, a travel expense that you can upload all kinds of receipts, and you could add, repeating rows here that total the currencies and whether that's for travel expense or purchasing or whatever. It's all kinds of possibilities. You can fulfill your drop list with different information, pulling from databases. You can employee ID could be set to put in the ID and it'll pull information from the user, human resources database. All kinds of stuff you can do. Here's another type form. It's just showing you a range of forms that can be done and with NITRO Studio here. And then we have more of them in the form showcase on our website. We can hit the enlarge and see the full image of it that's there. So that is a preliminary view of the forms. Again, they work in classic or modern, and they also work on the mobile device. Now I'm going to go over and go a little bit more into NITRO Studio itself. The video? What video are we seeing? Is there a question, Ryan? Any questions at this point?
No, we're just one question was about the
Oh
presentation
yeah,
of the video after the fact, but no, keep plugging ahead.
yeah. It's right. It will be available. So let me go into NITRO Studio. Here's a sample program in SharePoint called an access request list. Under the underlying this is the NITRO Studio. So I'm gonna go over to NITRO Studio and talk about all the different components of it. So when you put NITRO Studio in a site, and we can talk about how it's loaded and all the ways of implementing NITRO Studio, but I want to show you there's many components to it. There's the forms, the workflows, the reporting, the portals, approvals, lookups that go cross-site, AI services like chatbot, branding that can show the different different quick launches, different banners, different colors. There's cascaded lookups, category type, city, state, that kind of stuff. Conditional formatting, where you can format the list to show KPIs or progress bars or highlight the different colors for different conditions. Custom actions, very powerful for we put buttons on the form. Manage email, synchronize email, incoming emails are converted to tickets or work orders or requests. Linked items, where you're linking together the different purchase items as part of a purchase order or subcomponents of an asset as part of an asset record. For example, roll up multiple lists into one. You can search across lists in sophisticated ways. You can use a list view of different ways of showing the list view with tabbed interfaces. There's a print manager where you can print out and generate documents like invoices and purchase orders from the form itself. Tiles and dials is a way of showing information in a dashboard. A user info filler will pull in information into the form from different databases in Active Directory. So if we're back looking specifically at the forms, we see that there is a form here. If I open up new item, this is not is it simpler than the ones I showed you before. It could be dressed up quite a bit if we wanted to. Here's a form, and it has the access request, and I'll show you how this is done in NITRO Studio. One thing I'll show you right off the bat is that if you go choose certain settings here, that opens up another area called SQL. If you choose something else, it will hide that area. So there's dynamic form there just to show you a little bit about that. But let's go see how this is developed inside of the NITRO Studio. So we have the form here. Okay, so I'm clicking around a lot. Let me go through the process. You are in the access request system with the forms, and you click the forms tool, and it's going to open up this forms designer for the access request. Here's the access request form. This is a whole subject in itself, and I'm already like 40 minutes or something into this webinar. We're going to do something tomorrow, a webinar on NITRO Studio specifically. We're going to do some in November, also the one-on-one integration talks I'm talking about, the one-on-one demos and trials that I mentioned earlier. Can go really in depth of what's possible in the NITRO Studio Forms Designer, as well as all those other elements of NITRO Studio I showed you. And the reason I'm bringing this up in this webinar is to show you that whatever you're doing in InfoPath can be done in NITRO Studio. Very brave statement, and if anybody wants to challenge us on it, send us your challenges, please, because that's what our goal here is to have complete capabilities of InfoPath Forms or a suitable substitute in our Forms Designer. And I think we're pretty close to that, but sometimes people throw us a curveball that that we never realized could be done in InfoPath Form. And then our development team steps up to the plate and comes up with something that can solve that problem. So it's a very much a interactive process with our customers to help them get to the point where they can replace InfoPath Forms. All right, there's a lot going on this Forms Designer, and it's so much you can do here. All right, so here is, there's one part you can have columns or tabs. If you want tabs, you can be tabs instead of columns. Instead of sections, sorry, there's sections and columns. This is sections right now. You can go to tabs if you want to go to tabs, make it tabs instead of section. You can add buttons to it if you want that do certain custom actions on it. So maybe you have a custom action you want to put here. That custom actions is defined in our NITRO Studio custom actions. It could be something like start an approval process or something like that, and it could show up that button only when the certain category in access, certain category is chosen, then it shows the button, or so only to certain users it could show that button. A lot of possibilities, and that helps starting to build the forms and the workflows are starting to become enmeshed with each other at this point. So the form is given the opportunity to initiate a workflow, whether by someone pushing this button like go read the database and bring information in, or notify somebody, or whatever the act, you escalate it or reassign it or whatever, as well as workflows that happen behind the scenes based on certain triggers, like system events, like items created, items modified, there's certain due date. So there's both what you call user-initiated actions and there's system-initiated workflows. Both of those are going on in this form through this. So the form and the workflows and actions are coming together. Now, going back to the forms controls, you can put on any kind of column from the list on here. You can create a new column if you need, or edit a column that's already exists. If you wanted to edit a column, you could go here and edit a column and revise it. There's this integration with the list and the columns and the capabilities, so that the list and the form and the actions are all tied together really nicely in this interface to do it. And then there's some advanced functions like custom JavaScript, et cetera, et cetera. This is where I take a one-on-one demo to show you all the capabilities. But this is just a small sample of what can be done. You can see that you can line up the labels on the left. You can make them on you can make it 2 columns or 3 columns or 4 columns. You can add colors here. You can show these options as horizontal if you want to do that instead of that. You can come here and say, well, I don't need that extra column right there, the extra choice here. There's 4 choices. Maybe you don't want cancel on there anymore. You can take that off. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff you can do. I'm only showing you like really basics. There's so much. I really feel like we have to have a whole webinar just on this forms designer. When you publish it, that won't be there anymore. So we have a whole on that. Let me show you another kind of interesting form that we went into. Let me see where it is up here. I think it's up on this one. Okay. Here's another type form where someone was getting more colorful and elaborate with it and showing the table functions. This is where you start to get really a huge amount of control over how the form looks. This is experimental. You can merge, if you want here and you want to merge cells, you can merge cells. You can set properties on it. You can set, so what happens is you start to have a way of making the form look like what I was showing you earlier, which is these forms over here. How do you get from that to this? Well, this is a big box of text. This is aligned up a certain way. The table of the form is set up to show, the labels this way or that way. I mean, it's all kinds of different ways you can arrange it using this forms designer and the tables and what columns you're using and what you need to put in there. That's how you get from that to that, from the form here to what you're going to want to produce in your InfoPath form. So I think with the time we have, I don't want to go too deep into this forms designer. I just want to show you there's a tremendous amount of capabilities that come up with all kinds of interesting and elaborate forms that will meet your InfoPath needs. And if people want to go into this more, let's do a one-on-one or look at one of our other workshops that teach you how to use it. People pick this up very quickly and they're able to modify the forms because it's no code. I mean, you can add some JavaScript if you want, but it's really no code, citizen developer kind of style of creating forms here. But along with that, there's also a number of workflows and custom actions that can go along with that form. So you have your workflows and maybe at a certain due date, it's coming up. So you want to initiate a notification and an escalation. Maybe you want to have a button on there that says generate a document and things like that. So one thing that also I want to point out is that we are not excluding the use of, say, Power Apps or Flow in our system. So if you use NITRO Studio as the core form and workflow solution, you can also use some of the benefits of something like Flow for some more connector type capabilities. So what I'm saying here is that one of our custom actions, which show up here, you define the custom action in our custom action tool. This custom action right here will initiate a Microsoft flow. So what it does, it says, take the attachment, that if there was one on here, take the attachment and put it into OneDrive. Well, it could put it into Salesforce, or it could interact with whatever flow connector you can have here. So we're saying that our system is fully self-contained within itself in the SharePoint and Office 365 world, but it also can use Microsoft Flow and other capabilities to extend it to that you not only have integration inside of SharePoint, but you also can interact with databases or other outside systems, other parts of Office 365 quite well. So that makes it so that you have a full solution, not just fully integrated with Flow. So if I was going to push that, it would come up, and that's done inside of our NITRO custom actions right here. And in the custom actions for this access request list, and I'm kind of jumping around a little bit here because there's so much to explain, and really it's something where it'd be good to have interaction with the users. So if you have any opportunity to do a conversation with us, I can show you exactly what you're looking for. But let's look at this save attachments to OneDrive workflow here that we created. Easy to create with this UI, nice, easy custom action UI. And what it's going to do is show that there are a number of actions here, 2 actions: send to OneDrive and notify the client that the attachment's been sent to OneDrive, so you can invoke a workflow. Well, any custom action or workflow can have any number of these actions right here. We will give you a large set of possibilities, and you can have multiple ones that like cascade off of each other. And this one, I'm emphasizing this one here because it does this really interesting thing with Microsoft Flow, where it will invoke this Microsoft Flow and then put this attachment into OneDrive. That's one example. But there's many other things you can do with the custom actions here. If we're back on the list here, and we're open up on one of these items. Come on, open up. We're going to see the other actions that are at the top, and one is like generate a document. So maybe you want to generate a document that is generate the access request certificate, attach it, becomes an attachment to the program, to the ticket. And now we have an attachment here. This is all done with workflows. We generated this document, certificate of access, and it says, whatever you want to design here. Maybe you had somebody who went through a process, got approved, and now they have to generate a certificate. You can arrange this with a template, whether it's a Word template or one of our templates. And now you have this certificate that's attached to it, and then you can download it or whatever. But if you want to go back to the form, you can now save the attachment to OneDrive. So you click that, and it's going to move it over to OneDrive. Sure you want to do that? Yes, I am. So you move it over there, and it sends the attachment to OneDrive. So I'm showing you just very, very, preliminary, very, very basic amounts of workflows that can put together through NITRO Studio. There's a number of things you can do to create whatever workflow process you want to put in place there. And it's done this. It's send the attachment to OneDrive, stored in a particular place wherever the certificates are stored, and notified the client that that person has passed whatever inspections or something like that. So, and all this can be done on the mobile device. Now, again, I'm glossing over a huge amount of information about NITRO Studio because our focus on this webinar is InfoPath replacement, and that NITRO Studio is a very powerful tool to do that. And I hope that's been the case has been made for that, but I still think that we could talk to you personally, one-on-one, or do a demo, a trial, and get even more deeper into what it's going to take to move off of that. And also, if you're just in the preliminary stages, this gives you or your management some fodder for making the case to do this. It isn't like, oh, we're just lost in the woods, we don't know what to do. Well, here we are doing it, Crow Canyon. We have the tools to do it. We have the methodology, and we're gaining more and more knowledge as we work with more clients on it, that we can be your partner in InfoPath replacement. Now it's getting towards like the top of it's like 5 or 6 minutes left in this hour. I could go on and on about it. I think it's really something where we have to have a conversation and help you. And maybe you're not ready right now, this week, tomorrow, or anything. But in the future, keep Crow Canyon in mind as the InfoPath replacement company that's going to power up your capabilities to do that and help you along the way. Now, in addition to that, we also have the business applications ready to go, powered by our NITRO. We also have the NITRO Studio by itself to build other forms, and nothing to do with InfoPath necessarily. It's just something that you might want to use, for your own process to build. You might want to just put a help desk in place, or have a work order need, or the other things we were talking about earlier, document management, security access requests, and many other custom projects we've done. So there's a lot of capabilities to use use Crow Canyon's applications of NITRO Studio outside of InfoPath replacement, but also if you are in that place where you have to replace InfoPath Forms and you're getting it's getting down to the wire, get in touch and let's work together and make it happen. Right now, what I'd like to do is just kind of chill on the webinar and see if there's any questions. Ryan?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Let's go
We
through
have
some.
a few questions from existing customer of ours. His name's Juan Sanchez. He works for a company that's coming on with us, and he had a question primarily about, okay, what happens when you change something on a form and then publish it, right? So in this case, when we publish a form on a list, we make a change on a list. Is that going to affect the existing list items, right? Is that going to change the form for that existing list item? And the answer is yes. So whenever you publish a form or change a form on the list, it's going to reflect on all list items for that particular list. So in this case, it's only going to show the changes for the columns that were changed, right? If you change column A to column B, column A is no longer going to be there, B is going to be shown, but columns C through Z are still going to be displayed as they were on the first iteration of the form. Now, in this case, we're talking about archival of data and how to make that happen. One of the features in NITRO Studio is the availability to template a form or template a form on a list. Export out those list settings and form settings from that original list and apply them to a new list. So in this case, if we're looking at, okay, we're taking data from January 1, 2019 to December 31st, 2019. That data is going to be very similar as we roll into 2020, but there are going to be a few tweaks on that form. What do? We want to use that same kind of idea, but we want to make sure that that data is locked into place and the forms we used for calendar year 2019 don't change. So what we would do is we would take that list settings, take those form settings, export them out, create a new list, and re-import the form settings into the now 2020 list, still giving you the base form to work off of, but now you can make your changes on that list, and the data existing in the 2019 list won't be changed, and they're still going to be presented as you guys saved them originally.
I'm showing the export import of form settings. We also have the export import of workflow settings too. So you can see that you can manage forms. I didn't go into any depth about you can have multiple forms on a list. You can have different forms for different users. I mean, there's all different forms for display and edit versus new, different forms that show up different sections depending on who the users are or what the conditions are. It's so many variables, right, Ryan? I mean, it's
yeah,
incredible.
and this is actually something that came directly from a customer help trial. I can't remember exactly what customer, but this is something that's pretty prominent in InfoPath, being able to have like a forms library. So this is something that we felt we needed to add in to make that ease, creating new forms, kind of having like a base template to work off of. And now we've applied that same logic to not only the forms, but also our workflows, as well as our custom actions within NITRO Studio. So it gives you that kind of foot to stand on. You don't feel like you're having to duplicate work or recreate something that's already been created and put into place.
I was just flicking around on some of the portal things we're doing. I think we didn't mention about modern UI and responsive design enough, maybe, in how all these things are show up quite well in the modern, like mobile device. I mean, in modern UI. So another possibility there. It's mobile capabilities of it. Anyway, what other questions did we run into here?
Right now we're just looking at like pricing questions.
Yeah, we'll deal with
And
those.
if you have pricing questions, feel free to shoot those over. I will answer you privately, or I will send an email after the webinar with our pricing structure and how it breaks down. But basically, it's dependent upon what type of SharePoint you're using and the number of users within your system. But like I said, if you have pricing questions, you can send them to sales@crowcanyon.com or shoot in a note, and I will follow up with you personally after the webinar here.
Right, and just make a point that there is a free trial of NITRO Studio for a 30-day trial, and that you can take and get that installed in your SharePoint on premises and also online. Also, we should mention we have a NITRO Secure version for on premises that really is meant for, people who need no access to the internet, not that on the, but they don't want their SharePoint access in the internet. All their information for regulatory reasons have to stay contained within their SharePoint farm. Another point about what our NITRO Studio is that it works on premises, whereas Power Apps is not. Power Apps and Flow are not, on-premises tools at this point. So we cover a lot of areas that Power Apps doesn't cover, and like capabilities. And the other point about it, it's just kind of fun to play around with the forms and make them do all these different things and publish them and see what's possible and get these challenges of what can and can't be done, how the form should be arranged. And we have this kind of like in-house joke between us is like, send us your forms. We always tell our customers, challenge us as to what can and cannot be done with the forms, and we'll see what we can do about making the form look what we can. And we have a lot of fun challenges, like here's making up forms, like crazy forms like the W4 form in NITRO Studio, for example. Right here you can see, this is like it was an in-house challenge. Can you do this? And it came out like this. Look, this is all stuff that can be done, and we feel real confident at this point that we can match not only InfoPath forms but even paper forms. Well, let's put it this way: we can do paper forms better. Not just, we don't want to just match them, we want to do them better. And I haven't even Ryan, I didn't even have time to go into the chatbot and what we're doing with portals and modern
Right.
UI. So much to it, right?
Yeah, we just had a question about connecting to SQL databases.
Oh,
That's another feature we didn't touch on, but leveraging external data columns. So yeah,
yeah, let me show that.
absolutely. Yeah, I think Scott hit the nail on the head as he's pulling this up. I mean, if you have questions, feel free to reach out. A lot of my time is spent working with folks in similar situations to you guys as, hey, I'm thinking about moving to InfoPath. Here's a form I'm trying to recreate. And either we set up calls to walk back and through it on a trial, or calls and emails are passed back and forth. So if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And I think another great example that Scott showed here is that, we definitely take customer feedback. We want you to test this. They want you to poke and prod it and pull it apart so that we can be a true InfoPath replacement. And when things pop up that we don't have, we're always open to adding them in. Like one of the customers asking questions today was specifically around NITRO Secure, or they helped us kind of spearhead this NITRO Secure version. And so like we're open, we're willing to take anything that you guys have on. So don't hesitate to reach out.
That's right. And a webinar like this takes two levels. One is like guidance on how there's a whole strategy or like way of moving off InfoPath. And I wanted to cover that in this webinar, that it's not just the mechanics of creating a form, it's also a strategy of moving off InfoPath, of how you're going to analyze what you have, how you're going to know what your scope of your project is. Are you going to think in terms of solutions or replacement with existing applications? What's the best way going forward? That's one aspect. The other aspect is the down and dirty nitty gritty details of how do you actually construct this form and workflows in a new solution. So we're kind of operating on both levels, Crow Canyon, the kind of consultant level of what's the wisest and smartest way or best way to move off of InfoPath, and having a bunch of resources available for that, as well as our own in-house expertise and partners we work with. And then there's also the nitty-gritty of using NITRO Studio, the forms, workflows, custom actions, printing, and everything else in there to actually perform the actual process of replacing InfoPath. So right. Hopefully we covered both of those areas to some degree, but we'll be glad to talk to you at whatever level or whatever of interest to you. And hope this webinar was valuable. We have a number of events. Just to finish off, I'll just say quickly, we have a webinar tomorrow, which is specifically on building, building things inside of NITRO Studio. And then we also have, we go to these events. We go into this event in Chicago, SharePoint Saturday. SharePoint Fest, in Seattle. And we're going to go to other SharePoint Saturdays here and there. So we're around I was trying to get up the webinars coming up. It's on our webinars page. So I'll just go here, webinars. Yeah, Crow Canyon /webinars, easy enough. You'll see that there's a whole bunch of webinars coming up. And Ryan's going to be doing an onboarding solution in November, for instance, showcasing that.
We have other ones coming up. We have a number of on-demand. We've done a huge amount of work with how to use SharePoint, NITRO Studio, and how to move off InfoPath, and just a large body of work that we hope you can take advantage of in your path. Well, anyway, thank you for attending, and we'll end it there, and hopefully we'll hear from you. We'll send out a recording. We'll send out some links and ebook and other information and keep you informed on where we're going with this. And thank you all, and have a good day.